Okay, so we're live and on the air now, so everybody's being recorded. And I'm repeating that not because I have to, but because it's pertinent to today. Today we're going to talk about liability and accountability. Isn't that what I said at the beginning of class last time? I cheated. I listened to the lecture again to find out what we were talking about because I remember saying what we were going to talk about. And yes, it's been 2 weeks, and that's exactly what I said we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about accountability. We're going to talk about liability. And we're also going to talk about the traditional accountability and liability. We're going to talk about cyber accountability and liability. And then we're going to prognosticate a little bit. That's my $5 word. We're going to prognosticate. Okay? And tonight I want to try out a feature. They put in all this fancy technology for me in this classroom. And I haven't really tried it yet, so I kind of want to. Let's give it a shot.
Well, that's true.
Isn't it? Yeah. All right. So what you should see is a blank screen, and I should now be able to actually write on the screen for you. So, yep. Does that work? No, that just draws. Eraser, there we go. And back to the pen. Okay. Fine. Liability. Apparently, it doesn't keep up with how fast I write, so that's going to take some adjusting to. Today, I want to talk about liability. What is liability? If you're held liable for something, what does that mean?
Legally responsible.
Well, I heard the word responsible, I heard the word legal, and I heard legally responsible, the phrase. So let's go into that. Legal. I think I'm getting the hang of this, except for my eyes. Legal, responsible, and legally. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Responsible. What does that mean? Liability is a huge thing. What industry is built around liability and risk?
Insurance.
Absolutely, it's insurance. This is a, feel free, Google, tell me, how many billions of dollars does the insurance industry contribute to the GDP? How much money turns over in the U.S. insurance industry? I don't have a clue. Somebody shout it out when they find it. There's an entire profession built around liability, but there's also a very long and rich tradition, legal tradition, of liability. This country, what is freedom? Because freedom and liability are hand in hand.
In 2014, it represented $1.26 trillion.
In the United States?
Yes.
Say that again?
1.26.
1.26 trillion. We're going to do this.
2014.
Wow. I'm having fun with my toy. I'm sorry if the pauses are awkward or something. But that's a lot of money. Go back to my question. What's freedom? Freedom and responsibility and liability go hand in hand. But freedom and responsibility are frequently used together, right? Yes, you have those freedoms, but you have to use them responsibly. Yes, you can say whatever you want, within limits. Yes, you can do whatever you want, so long as it doesn't affect other people too adversely. And I use the word too adversely, because nobody is guaranteed the freedom not to be upset. Nobody is guaranteed the freedom to be completely left alone. That's not in the Constitution. right? You'll hear religious people say it's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. And in some degree, they're right. Because not believing yourself doesn't prevent other people from believing it. It doesn't give you the right to segregate yourself off from those beliefs, any more than being an adamant, fervent believer gives you the right to separate yourself off from society completely, to separate yourself from atheists, from the concept, the idea of atheism, because freedom and ideas go hand in hand. The free traversal of ideas goes hand in hand with freedom. So what about responsibility? I want to break down responsibility first, because I think that's pretty key here. What is responsibility? Feel free to chime in online, guys. What is responsibility? Somebody talk. All right. Youngest person, what's responsibility?
It's
This is
your
important.
obligation, I guess.
Obligation. Okay. To what?
To follow the rules, sounds like.
Obligation to follow the rules? I've heard people talk about an obligation to not follow the rules, a responsibility to rage against the machine. I've heard about this. I think I read about it in the Revolutionary War.
There may be an
book.
obligation to certain actions. Maybe
An
we don't
obligation to action. That's a deontological theory that Immanuel Kant espoused.
All right.
Yeah. What? Deontological?
No.
What?
It's obligation.
An obligation to action. Okay. Let's see. How old are you?
28.
24.
Right. Oldest person. Responsibility. You can't use hers. Give me something else. I got a 10-year gap. That's not bad.
9.
Is it 9 now? Okay.
I aged.
Turns out you do that. Every time you go around the sun, it turns out that happens. All right, 9-year difference. Biggest difference I've ever had with one of these is like 30 in class. That was great.
Well,
When I did one of these exercises. I've had bigger differences, but when I needed it, 30 was the biggest I could accomplish. Responsibility. Tell me what it means to you. Represent. What generation are you? Are you a millennial or?
I don't know. It's iffy.
Huh?
It's iffy.
You're at the iffy stage?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what is responsibility?
Say.
I need the Jeopardy thing.
Yeah.
I need do.
Obligation to do no harm.
To do no harm. It's funny you say do no harm because that's an oath that's taken by which profession?
Doctor.
Yeah, it's the Hippocratic Oath. Do no harm. This is taken on willingly by that profession, the medical profession, the Hippocratic Oath. Do no harm. They take on this obligation willingly. So are all obligations taken on willingly?
No.
No? Are you sure? Are you positive? Are you forced in your life to actually get a job? Like to graduate school? I mean, we force you to go to school. You have an obligation to go to school until you're 16. Huh?
We're 20.
Or you're 28. Well, we didn't force you to do that. You chose to do that. We do force you. I mean, you have an obligation to your studies, but I didn't do that to you. If you don't care if you fail, I don't care if you fail. It's your obligation. My only obligation is to show up on time, provoke some thought, hopefully give you something that you see as valuable for your money. And I took that on willingly. I'm not required to sign up to teach. They did ask, pretty please do so. But that's not a requirement. Online guys, do you like the slideshow or do you prefer the camera view? now that we've done it a little.
The slideshow is fine.
Okay. I didn't know if the camera was adding much, so I figured I'd try this.
I'd like to throw something out there as far as responsibility. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure, but I am probably the oldest. But I think of responsibility as you're accountable. You're held accountable. You have a moral obligation to fulfill something.
What's funny is that on my other board with my notes, to make sure I don't forget part of my train of thought, is accountability and liability are right next to each other. Responsibility is not up there because I knew I was going to start with responsibility. But yes, it's accountability. Which we're going to do ACC. As a matter of record. Also accountability. What else? What's an obligation?
You're required to do.
Something you're required to do?
Or
Maybe.
Is something strongly encouraged, basically. If you're required to do it, there isn't necessarily a punishment for not.
There can
There's
be.
plenty of punishment.
There
Yeah.
can be.
Don't pay off a loan. See what happens to you.
Don't pay your taxes.
Right, right. But you willingly took on these obligations. Right? You willingly took student loans, even if you felt like there was no other option because everybody told you you have to go to school and whatnot, right? But you willingly took these on. These obligations, nobody twisted your arm and said you have to have student loans. Nobody twisted your arm, well, your parents may have twisted your arm the first time around, and said you have to go to college. It's a huge political issue. College, I felt obligated too. I did. I felt obligated to go to college. I was the valedictorian of my high school class. I would have been completely, amazingly satisfied with life to sail around the world and do other things. But I felt incredibly obligated to go to college, and look where it landed me. In college forever. Yeah, back in college. I did. I felt incredibly obligated to go to college. I felt obligated because Sam Houston State, I got my undergrad here. Sam Houston State said, here, have some money to go to college. That was cool. And it really, it applied a matter of pressure. Here, join the honors college. I got rid of that one. I figured out that was a false obligation that I did not need to take on. Just so you know. They want you to do all kinds of things to be in that honors college. And I discovered a social life. But too often obligations are seen as imposed burdens, when in fact the vast majority of obligations are accepted and sought out. And from a legal perspective, there are many cases where if you fail to meet your obligations, there are legal sanctions that can be levied against you. Right? You don't pay off your mortgage. They take your house. That's my mortgage.
Don't pay your car note.
Hey, I'm not drawing a car. Yes, you don't pay your car, they take your car. Who's they? Whichever entity, because I'm owner financing a car for a friend of mine right now. He needed it. I have mixed feelings about it, but it felt like the right thing to do, so I'm helping him out. I don't like it, but I understand that I entered into it willingly. And go ahead.
What about insurance on a car?
He's got insurance, and there's a form you can sign with the state to allow them to register it in their name even though you own it, so that the financial liability is his. Yeah, that's one thing teaching law has helped me with. I'm pretty rock solid there, and I'm financing the car for him, and it's pretty good terms and whatnot. But I understand that if he doesn't meet that obligation, I'm going to take that car back. That's going to be stressful and awkward, and I'll probably buy him a beer. But that's what's going to happen if he doesn't meet his obligation. Now, there's absolutely no reason he shouldn't meet his obligation. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done it. And he's never let me down on anything before. But you never know. And so both sides willingly entered into this obligation. I'm obligated to sign the title over to him and finish the completion of the sale once he gives me the amount of money that we agreed upon. Right? It's willing. And both of us have legal recourse in the case, because there's a contract and everything. Both of us have legal recourse in the case, both mostly through civil court and small claims court, because it's an inexpensive car. But we both have legal recourse. There are legal mechanisms we can fall back on to force the adherence to and abiding by the obligations that we entered into, right? And durable goods and real property are the most common obligations that people enter into, right? House mortgages and cars. When you buy something, obligations are specified right up front. Has anybody bought a refrigerator lately? A car lately?
Yeah.
Anything lately. If you bought anything that cost more than $500, you probably paid attention to whether or not it had a warranty. Yeah. Yeah, you know why I drive a Hyundai sports car instead of a Dodge sports car, other than a $60,000 price difference? Because, oh my God, that warranty even applies to their sports cars. It's amazing. But what are their obligations under that warranty? Sure, it depends on what the wording is. It's whatever's in the warranty. What are my obligations? When you buy a car, what are your obligations? Because it's a two-way street. That's another thing. There's almost no such thing as a one-directional, a unilateral obligation. There's almost no such thing. I'm obliged to you for something, and you are obliged back to me with something. And you can find what the other party owes you in almost every circumstance. Right? What was the question I just asked before? What do I owe the car company? What are my obligations other than paying the note? And that's actually to a bank, right? The network starts to get very complicated. Okay? And in fact, I make sure to introduce this formula in every class I teach because it's very important to demonstrate scale. That's the formula for calculating the total number of communication pathways in any system. Total potential pathways of interactions. Total potential pathways of transit of information, total potential pathways of confusion and problems. Okay? And so for me, if I have a car, I have a lender, and I have a manufacturer. We all have obligations to one another. Right? It's a simple system. The lender gives the manufacturer the money, and there's a dealer in there that we just wrap up in the manufacturer for this example. Okay? The lender gives the manufacturer the money because I have promised to pay the lender plus a premium, usually a processing fee and an interest rate over time. I have promised that they will get at a minimum a certain amount back for this money that they have promised to the manufacturer of the car. The manufacturer will provide me a car. What do I owe them back? And I'm picking a car because almost everybody in the United States, especially in college, master's level, has a car. And so in theory, everybody has some context to share here. Okay?
I guess in terms of the warranty kind of idea, you're kind of obligated not to go drive it off a bridge, and I guess you could say not to purposefully, intentionally damage.
So my intentions have to be good. That's, in legal terms, that's known as acting in good faith. Okay? Now we're getting somewhere. Good faith and intent. What else? What are the actions that demonstrate, other than not driving off a bridge intentionally? What are the actions that they demand of me that demonstrate my good faith?
Keeping up with the maintenance.
Maintenance. That's the most common one. Changing the oil specifically. If I change the oil on time and I meet their expected and stated expectations for my obligation to maintain that warranty, and it's in the manual, there is a maintenance schedule in the manual. And if I have not done what's in that maintenance schedule, if I have not upheld my end of the bargain, they can choose not to uphold their end of the bargain for any system affected by that negligence. That's the key. Any system affected by my negligence, they can choose not to exercise the warranty, not to allow me to exercise the warranty. So, tires, usually not covered under warranty. You have to get a third-party warranty from like Discount Tire for that, right? And I gotta tell you, some people don't think that's worth the money. For me, it always has been.
Especially sports car tires.
What's that?
Especially sports car tires.
Yes, especially sports car tires. That when you buy a car, you need to research total cost of ownership. That's another reason I don't own the Dodge or the Porsche. I would love a Porsche. I don't want to feed the tire appetite of a Porsche, because it's not all about the actual purchase price of the vehicle. Because you can get a used Porsche fairly inexpensively. By the way, I'm a car guy. I think I've said that before, but I really like Porsches. So sorry for the sidetrack. Anyway, so I act in good faith and I maintain my vehicle. As long as I have, in good faith, done everything I think I'm expected, especially if I take it to the dealership, a nominative dealership, meaning a Hyundai dealership for my car, a Dodge dealership for the car I didn't buy, etc., right? If I take it to them and I seek their counsel in good faith, and I do everything that they told me to, that they tell me is required, then I have leverage to force them to honor the warranty if needs be. Now, most car companies honor warranties just out of hand. They go out of their way because the last thing they want is for you to climb on the internet and give them a bad review. That's a thing these days, which is both good and bad, right? So what does bad faith look like?
The dude that hasn't got an oil change in 100,000 miles.
Sure, no oil change, no tune-ups, no maintenance at all, same tires.
Massive modification.
Massive modification of the tire. Not the tire, the car as a whole. That's absolutely right. And they state right up front that modifications of X, Y, and Z type void the warranty. And modifications of some types, for example, my car has a turbo. If I put a bigger turbo on there, it wasn't designed to withstand the pressures of a bigger turbo. If I change the chip, the programming, and if you remember, we finished out on cars last time. See how we're... Hey, that's what happened. We finished out on cars last time because if I were to just change the programming, my current turbo is capable of putting out more pressure than my engine was designed to handle on a regular basis. And so even just that could affect, and I could be negligent in doing so, if I expect them to honor the warranty, if I still expect them to. However, it's not negligent, it's not in bad faith, if I accept that my actions will cancel the warranty. Right? Make sense? Now that doesn't mean you're always going to agree with the car dealership or with any other party, right? Let's go back to do no harm. How often have you seen an episode of House when you have nothing else to watch? And people accuse House of doing harm instead of do no harm. It's like every episode, right? Isn't that what the
Yeah.
show is
Proves
based
them
on?
wrong.
Huh?
He proves them wrong.
Sure, he proves them wrong, but he absolutely hurts people. He absolutely does. Every once in a while, they actually die, and they discuss that too. They talk about how the process works and how the hospital gets sued and his license comes under review. That's all part of the show, right? But you go back to this do no harm. It's every time a surgeon cuts an individual, that's technically doing harm. And so it's a broad philosophical palette. And it's weighing cost and benefit. You're going to hear cost-benefit analysis throughout your entire career. You're going to hear risk acceptance and cost-benefit analysis and business impact analysis, which come from those two. Okay? The third comes from the first two combined. So in the do no harm ethos, there's an inherent need to balance what you're going to do that's going to hurt somebody, because it is. You stick a needle in my arm, it hurts. But the good you do when you give me a tetanus shot keeps me alive when I otherwise would have died. That's an easy example, right? Especially considering I work out in my rusty barn all the time. I probably would be dead right now without a tetanus shot. Right? Right. Well, it actually kind of makes me want to go get another tetanus shot right now, just thinking about it. My back kind of hurts. Maybe that's just saying. And there are other places, other professions that have similar ethos. Just the facts, Mac. I'm showing my age now. Just the facts, Mac. What profession is this? That's facts, not fakes. Just the facts, Mac.
Wasn't that from an old police show?
Yep. It's police and journalists. It's usually journalists that ask for just the facts in those shows. Just the facts, ma'am. It's also the detective sometimes. No, I don't want your opinion, just what happened. It's exactly right. News journalists, it used to be a stereotype that they would say, just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts, Mac. Huh?
What opinions?
Well, and honestly, they wanted opinions. It's cyclical. Journalistic integrity goes through cycles. And some of it has to do with the stuff we're talking about tonight, because we're getting ready to move into the legal issues. Okay? Others of it have to do with just trends in that industry. Right? Yellow journalism is an old thing. Yellow journalism is headline-driven, is shock and awe, and is lots of things that we still criticize in the 24-hour news cycle. Right? They go for impact over substance, impact over objective analysis, subjectivity and inflammatory speech over objectivity and rational analysis. Right? But just the facts, Mac, sums up the core of the journalistic ethos. They don't raise their right hand and take an oath or give an affirmation. Remember that. Like a doctor does. But there are codes of ethics out there that they're supposed to follow. There are also legal structures that rein in and define these professions, specifically journalists. So, what's defamation of character? Because that is in bad faith. Journalists are easy to use as an example of bad faith. I thought about using used car salesmen, but that's too easy. So, journalists acting in bad faith can impact the fates of entire nations. I picked journalists because this is an election year. What happens when a journalist does not objectively report the facts, but instead reports the facts in such a way as the candidate of their choosing looks better than the candidate not of their choosing? It hurts the other candidate, it hurts the process, and potentially hurts our country depending on who they pick. It also tarnishes the integrity of the profession as a whole, which is the main criticism of yellow journalism and headline journalism. Well, not much integrity left, he says, except that there are legal protections in place, right? Defamation of character, you can sue somebody for defamation of character. Libel, if you print something that is absolutely libelous, you can actually, I believe in some states, you can be arrested for libel. But you have to prove bad faith intent. Not just you're a crappy person, but you knew it and intended to be a crappy person. Okay? Not just that you're a bad journalist, but you knowingly, intentionally published something erroneous. Because if you are corrected and you just issue a retraction, and there is no pattern, that's another key. There's no pattern in your past history of publication to indicate that this is a regular thing, and you are willing to, and speedily do so, publish retractions of any mistakes you make. That's proper journalism. Sometimes maybe you moved too fast, but in general, that's proper journalism. However, proper journalism, as he said, might be a little dead some days. Not all days. Most of the shows, though, on Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, most of the primetime shows are not news desks anymore. They are editorial desks. They are shows to get opinion across and to show perspective. They do show perspective, especially if you watch all three. They do show perspective, but they don't show objective fact. And I think the biggest disservice we probably do to ourselves is to forget how to tell the difference between opinion and fact. And the problem is that this problem is not, this syndrome of forgetfulness is not just relegated to us. It's also everyone else out there listening to opinion over fact, relating with their heart instead of thinking with their mind. And these are the same people who are on juries, which is where this class goes. These are the people who are on the juries. These are the people who are making the decisions. These are the people who are deciding cases where intent is supposed to be the standard. Right? And so if you go out in public and you blatantly lie about me, I'm not a super duper public figure. So defamation of my character could be bad and could hurt me, but not to the same level as defamation of a public figure, say a sitting congressman. So I could pass a lie detector test, no problem. Have never cheated on my wife at all. However, that wouldn't stop, the truth wouldn't stop somebody from claiming that I had. Right? Never let the truth get in the way of a good story is what my dad says. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But it's not just a good story when your goal, and your intent, in bad faith, I'm hammering on these words intentionally, is to cause disharmony, problems, and to bring into question the integrity of your argument. Right? All right. What is a journalist? No, not what it used to be. What is a journalist? Define Journalist. Jennifer, what is a journalist?
Someone who reports the news or writes for a living. Articles.
Or writes, okay. Those are two different things according to, well, we're going to get to that. Right. Or a living. I think I need to be cursive on this thing.
Or if they do it as a hobby.
Well, what if they do it as a hobby?
Bloggers.
Like a blogger. So, last year, the reason I bring this up, and the reason this is important, and the reason this is in cyber law, is because last year, Congress tried to define what is and is not, more importantly, is not a journalist, i.e., who is and who is not press. You remember that word?
Mm-hmm.
Freedom of the press. What does press, and I'll put that here, that's what this line is reserved for. What does press get you? That blogger, that citizen, that person with an opinion, person with freedom of speech, and person with freedom of expression does not. What does press get you?
Access to figures.
Access to public figures, information about, I don't know, I got the internet. It used to be it also gave you access to networks of information around the world, like the AP wire and stuff like that. But the internet kind of screwed that up. It's a disruptive force in that regard.
But you're still part of the network.
You're still part of the network, absolutely.
Communicate with each other.
It's all about access. And this law was going into place because of access. You hit the nail on the head on the first try. Who's heard of the sniveling weasel, and I say that with, well, intent, Perez Hilton?
Heard of him?
Huh?
I'm aware of it.
You're aware of him? What does he do?
Blogger.
He's a blogger. See? This is what I need to see. I need to see if we consider him a tabloid journalist or a blogger. Less than, I don't know. Perez Hilton, it turns out, has actually broken a number of fairly high-profile stories. Now, none of them do we, I hope, care about. But if you are into reading People magazine, if you're into the paparazzi and you're into celebrity lives and celebrity drama, Perez Hilton has actually broken a number of high-profile stories. Perez Hilton is involved with a company called TMZ sometimes. Perez Hilton is involved with lots of other companies. Perez Hilton also started a company around his blog once his blog became successful. So if you have a company structure, you have employees, you're in the business of writing and presenting information, even if it's not generally considered news elsewhere, as in people who are concerned with politics don't care about celebrity, perhaps. Even if you focus on a specific segment, nobody would argue that the reporters from the staff writers, I won't call them reporters, the staff writers from Rolling Stone are not press. Nobody would argue that the staff writers from Playboy, hate to break it to you, are press. Nobody would argue that a number of other less than credible, typically, institutions, organizations, and outlets, media outlets, are press and are guaranteed that freedom, except when we start to use the word blogger. And so what this law tried to do was separate the blog community from the journalism community. Even if you're a professional journalist who has a blog, are you now a journalist or are you a blogger? I guess it would depend on how you applied for credentials. And this all came from some bloggers applying for White House credentials and getting declined to go to a White House press conference.
Blogging or
It's Didn't we just cover that a lot of the news is opinion? Didn't we cover what's the difference between his platform and Wolf Blitzer's platform? Wolf Blitzer, I was listening to Wolf Blitzer earlier today on satellite radio in preparation. I was listening to the news to hear how much opinion I could hear. It's full of it.
Does he actually go to the press conference?
Sometimes, yeah. He goes to the dinners. He gets access. It's all about access. Being press is about access. It's about making sure that you have exposure to events, exposure to people that the general public would care about, but to whom they would not have general access. So proximity, exposure, and access is what press gets you, right? And when you willingly, because nobody is forced into press, when you willingly transition and request the level of access and additional freedom, if you will, of press, you take on the obligations of press, which are non-defamation and non-libel. You only write about things that are true to your estimation and with good intent under the law. Now, that doesn't mean good intent as in you agree with the person. It doesn't mean good intent as in you believe that that they're doing something wrong, but you can't write about it. No, no, no. It means that you are intending to get your version of the truth that is not objectively, absolutely false across.
That's
Huh?
sources.
Yes, you got to have credible sources. You got to check those sources. Investigative journalism is different from daily news journalism, is different from tabloid journalism, is different from, right? And each one of them has, each subset of press and media has its own standards to which they're supposed to adhere. But now let's take this another step farther. Past press, past media, into just cyber. What happens? Who is the most hated man in the country? Google it. Who is the most hated man in the country?
Do you know the answer to
No, I
this?
don't. It changes.
Well, I figure it changes at some point.
I haven't looked it up today.
It changes every day.
I don't know. I should do a longitudinal study on searches like this. So, who is it? Martin Shkreli. He works. That's a good guy to hate. Martin Shkreli, he's the guy who purchased a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, and then,
And then
yeah.
he jacked up the price by like 5,500%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not percent. Times. 5,500 times. 55,000%.
What was it for again? It was for some big drug.
AIDS.
Yeah, okay, I thought it was.
It's an AIDS drug. Yeah. Okay. Now, it hasn't always been Martin Shkreli.
I think that's a little too loud.
No.
What's that?
No!
Before witness.
I think we just witnessed a murder. No?
Court.
What's that?
See you all in court.
Yes, see you all. It's been recorded. They don't need us. Yeah, it has been recorded. They do not need us. Where were we? It's not always Martin Shkreli. Okay? So what happens when people game that search engine? When people do enough search engine optimization, when people publish enough blogs, enough links, and enough cross-links, because those are parts of the ways that Google ranks links, right? To change, I expected it to be Donald Trump.
He has too many supporters right now.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, but lots of people who have been the answer to that question before have been popular, have had supporters. That guy is just absolutely so detestable. It works. And I hope he sees this video. Yeah, Martin Shkreli, you're a piece of work. Anyway, if lots of people have done this, and Google's algorithm is not smart enough to prevent abuse, who is liable for the defamation of character that is likely to occur in the event that a decent person or a questionably likable person or anybody not named Martin Shkreli pops up on that search? Who do we hold accountable? Is it the people? Are they responsible? The people who did the gaming of the search engine. If you can find them. But what if they meant it? What if there's a subset of people who hate this one person and they're just that vocal? Because the squeaky wheel gets the grease sometimes. Right? The ability to know how. You all of you, have the ability and know-how. Feel free to start a campaign that I need to raise. That's great. That would be awesome. Andy Bennett needs a raise. First search for Andy Bennett. Okay? But in terms of the most hated man in the world, that's libelous. If it's not true, he might actually be the most hated person in the United States right now. Okay?
He hasn't popped up for a little while.
Yeah, like a week.
Yeah, he's got good PR.
Yeah, hopefully they've handcuffed him to something and kept him away from his computer and everything.
He's petting baby feet.
He's
Yeah.
lucky the presidential campaign's around to take up
distract.
to this, to distract.
From him. That's absolutely right. So this is a huge issue because how do you find information? I already know the answer, but the answer is Google. It's a verb, it's a noun, it's a place, it's a thing, it's a service. We Google it. Even Google doesn't own Google anymore. Did you not know this? Alphabet owns Google. Yeah, Alphabet. Google is a subsidiary of a larger company. It's just a thing, not a company. Google is no longer a company. They sold itself to itself and changed the name. Yes, it's all that kind of machinations. But they wanted to break up some of their moonshot stuff, meaning one of their divisions is trying to make people live forever. Just in case that goes bad, they'd like to separate that from Google. So they can sever it off and... Yeah, exactly. Okay? So what the question is we all use it. It's a public service. It's almost a public utility. Okay? It's a very dangerous phrase. As we know from net neutrality, the word utility versus service is crucial. But Google almost is. It's at that threshold of critical use, critical mass, and critical social importance. And if you are looking for examples of who's the most hated person in the world, who's the most liked person in the world, who's the most liked person in the United States? Well, their algorithm automatically does this. That's the thing. Is it Taylor Swift?
Oh, please no.
Oh, her music's not nearly that bad.
Well, no, but
Come on, you want
He's trusted.
Oh. They refuse to tell me
Really?
who the most liked person in the United States is, even though they are willing. This doesn't help their case in a libel suit. See? Because they're not willing to take a stand on who's cool. They're only taking a stand based on search results. And can search results take a stand? That's another question. Can search results take a stand? If they're manipulated. Are their search results manipulated?
Probably not.
Yes, they are. Sponsored content goes to the top. There are certain ways that the content is penalized if you did this, that, or the other. If your website is not mobile compatible from the default screen, you get downranked in Google's current algorithm. If your website has pornographic content by whatever arbitrary scale Google is using, you know what it is when you see it. it gets downgraded. But does Google's search engine know what it is when it sees it? This is an important question. Because it used to be that everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, would pop up no matter what you search for. Whether it was images, links, whatever. The porn and the news in the same link screen based on your searches only. Not based on other things or other criteria. And so, this is why it gets so muddy. Because we don't have a framework in place to decide whose fault it is that somebody is being defamed in the search results. Who is held accountable if there's libelous information on screen 1? Because we know that by screen 100, search result page 100, there will be libelous information no matter who you Googled by that, right? But you usually expect the results on page 1 to be more credible, yes? How many of you go past page 10 on your search results?
Nobody goes past page 2.
Exactly!
I didn't find out.
Yeah, if you didn't find it in the first 2 pages, you used the wrong search words. So you get what I'm saying here is that the problem is we don't have a framework to decide who's at fault. But everyone desperately wants somebody to be at fault when they're the one who's been wronged. Yeah? When you're the one who is being wronged, you will want there to be a mechanism to get your day in court, to have your justice, and to go after what other philosophical, tangible, or financial remuneration needs you have. And in the cyber, usually financial, in the cyber world, it doesn't exist yet. And this is just a search result we're talking about. We're not talking about information you post on your blog. We're not talking about confusing satire with intent. We're not talking about any of these things. We're talking about the search results. Can a search result have intent? Can a search result be produced in bad faith? And if the answer is yes, they can, then the question is, the follow-up, are they? And how do you build, if you can build a framework around this, you will sell 1 million copies of that book. Okay? So if you're looking for something, here it is. If you're looking for an idea, if you're looking for inspiration for your final project, which is to propose legislation, federal legislation, I'm not making that mistake twice, I said state. Was it Texas? Did I say state or federal?
Probably both.
Fine. I'm not making the mistake of letting you pick any state in the country because I can't keep up with all 50 states' processes. Okay, so I can't do that. But we can do Texas or federal. Because not all the students are from Texas.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Probably if we can only choose one
Let's
state,
do
then
federal.
we do federal.
Anyway, your final project is to write legislation. Huh? It is long.
It gets longer.
The project is long. It's a long project. That's why I told you at the beginning, start thinking about it. And if you're looking for something, suggesting a legal framework around the is it assignation to assign? Around the assignation of blame in the case of online libel suits. The determination of blame in the case of online libel suits. How do you protect yourself against defamation? And this might even be, Europe now has a right to be forgotten. Does that need to be here? Is that the solution to this problem? The right to be forgotten. It's a good question. Especially with everything going digital, does that mean we shred everybody's records every 10 years and never keep a history book? Now we're talking another type of danger. Just a form of censorship, yes? There are lots of forms of censorship. But the question is, and also that's European censorship, so remember that's different than American censorship. Because they censor for political control and hate speech, or political control of hate speech, and we censor for political control of obscenity. Good. Okay. Cyber and digital systems have presented us with a ton of conundrums, just like the search results example.
Google is in no way.
I think you would have a hard time holding Google liable under the current framework.
So you don't think what's his face?
Martin
But-
Shkreli?
Yeah, you
Well,
don't.
the thing is that we clicked the link and went to a website that said that, right? So in that case, at least the first link is easy. But there are enough links out there that it's popping up. That he is the answer to the results. Who's the most hated man in the United States? Or did you say America? Not the United States, you said America? In the USA. See, because that's three different ways to describe the same thing. And which demographic uses which way could color the results. Right? The people who say in the USA, the people who would say in America, or the people who would say in the United States. And then there's that small offshoot who say in the United States of America. Each one of these places, each one of these perspectives rather, might yield a different result. Although I have a feeling Martin Shkreli is the most hated in all three. Just saying. Hi, Martin.
There are people who can't talk that.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. First, they should go ahead and read the First Amendment. Then they should read the protections of educators. And then they should read a couple more things, and then they can call me. Yeah, right there. You know how Google has those breakout windows that show you a picture of the person, like you say, what's
Yeah.
Jennifer Aniston's birthday, and it shows a picture of Jennifer Aniston?
Uh-huh.
Not that I've ever done that. Maybe. Yeah, so it breaks him out. He has a breakout box as the most hated man in the United States. Okay?
It's like having a picture.
Yeah. And so, it's totally possible that we're going to get to see whether or not Google is responsible, because he has PR people and the money to take Google to court over that. Yeah, good luck. Because it would need to be somebody who actually can...
Like, the ordering of the links is one thing, but when his face literally pops up when
Yeah,
you search
his
that,
face-
it is getting very excessive.
his face automatically pops up. Just like if you Googled, show me George Washington.
Yeah.
Okay? Who was the first president of the United States? Boom, picture of George Washington. Who's the most hated man in the United States? Boom, Martin Shkreli. Okay? Wow. All right. One place where he might have a case strong, if he were married and this caused him a divorce, he might have a case there. Right? Specifically. Because of the stress induced and stuff like that. Because he wronged the people he wronged, and he's even been called to Congress to testify on this. The people he wronged aren't Google. And so he might have a case. He won't win it, but he might have a case. His case would at least probably get heard because he has standing. Okay. What is the difference between accountability and liability? Go ahead.
I'll venture. Accountability is, to me, more of a moral responsibility or obligation, whereas a liability is more of a legal responsibility.
So there's usually a punishment attached to a liability.
There is punishment attached to liability, but it's not necessarily punishment, right? Because if you rear-end somebody because of an oil slick, you were doing a safe speed, you had no reason to think. In fact, the oil fell out of a truck 3 cars ahead of you. No.
No, in Texas, if
In
you
Texas-
rear end someone, no matter what if there's a 10-car like pile up,
Every
you
single person is
cannot
liable
stop.
for the person they
Yeah.
hit. in Texas. The truck, especially if that first car stopped in time because it saw the oil spill happening, and the second car stopped in time because it saw the oil spill happening, and the third car didn't see the oil spill, slammed on their brakes because the cars in front of them stopped, and the third car hits the second car, who hits the first car, who doesn't hit the truck, because the truck gets to keep going. Those, and he has no obligation to stop either. There's no legal mandate for him to stop. And so, none of those people will be issued a ticket. None of them will have legal sanctions applied to them or earn points on their licenses. However, each and every one of them will be liable for the damage their vehicle caused to another vehicle. Which is why we carry liability insurance, and now we're back to the first question of the day. We're back to the insurance of the $1.26 trillion industry, right? Now, in theory, most of the cases don't happen like that, where there's nobody at fault. Most of the time, the police officer can figure out who did what caused what, and who is to blame. Not just who's to be held liable, but who's to be held accountable. So frequently, liability ends up being the cost. The legally enforceable, she's absolutely right, this is legal. The legally enforceable consequences of some incident or action. However, accountability can be blame. And moral is not bad, but there's also legal. Who is legally accountable? Who is legally to blame? When a young child, let's say age 6, finds a loaded handgun left unsecured, not unsecured, unsecured, and accidentally shoots their sibling of indeterminate age, who do we hold accountable?
Parents.
It's the parents. It's actually the owner. Yeah, we hold, morally, we hold the parents accountable anytime a child dies, almost. But legally, it is the owner of the firearm who left it unsecured in a place where children were likely to be. So long as it was a place where children were likely to be, that is criminal negligence, and that person is held accountable criminally because of the moral weight of that negligence. And we have a whole system of law for that.
A case where there was some guy's house, he didn't have kids, he had guns lying around, somebody brought over their kid and he found him.
If he knew the kids were coming over and didn't take steps to warn the parents so that the parents could take remediative actions and or choose to leave the house, he or she is still accountable for the criminal actions. And the parents probably are accountable as well. Now, whether or not there's liability here, meaning, you know, are you gonna pay for it? Or, I mean, you can't pay for a kid's life. What the liability in this situation is, homeowners insurance is certainly going to come into it, right? The liability is the cost. Accountability is, for lack of a better word, blame. That difference makes sense? Mm-hmm. Anybody online want to add to or disagree? Because these are the distinctions as I've considered these over the last few years. These are the distinctions I've come up with. Because liability is usually civil, money, cost, responsibility to another person, making recompense for damages done, etc. And accountability is usually held to task, held to blame, locked away, right? Because you're not you're not settling a debt. You're not, and now we're getting into philosophy real quick. You're not settling a debt, a tangible debt, by being locked away. You're settling a debt to society. Society is holding you accountable for your actions. That doesn't cover the liability costs. Make sense? So now, where am I headed with this? Anybody know? Huh? Maybe? Okay. Cars are the theme of the day. Yes, it's the Google car. But not just the Google car, the autonomous car, the self-driving car, the driving assisted car, and any car where there is a computer system. So, first, before we get into fully autonomous cars, I want to talk I put a space there just in case there's recognition software somewhere. I want to talk about Toyota. Not Toyotas. I want to talk about Toyota Prius. Hey! I want to talk about the Prius because the Prius had this throttle problem. This throttle problem was, and of course Toyota didn't admit to it to start with because, wow, that's an oversight. But the throttle problem is that the throttle is what's called control by wire, or drive by wire, or fly by wire. Fly by wire is a proven technology that's been around for a long time. Okay? Meaning that the controls are separated digitally from the physical system. So your input goes in, and they're sent back digitally at a higher speed than traditional mechanically connected or hydraulically driven controls. Like the Stealth Bomber. The Stealth Bomber was the first major endeavor into fly-by-wire technology for a fixed wing, delta wing with no tail or section or anything, because to fly by wire in that type of wing to get the stability they needed with the payloads they needed at the range they needed, they had to use computer controls, just like quadcopters. If you had to balance your quadcopter by yourself without a gyroscope, you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. Those gyroscopes help make that a stable process, right? Especially since you're not actually riding on the thing. You have no feedback. You can't see what it's about to do. Okay? It's not the same as an airplane that goes in one direction and you can just control that. And speaking of radio control toys there. Okay? So Toyota has this problem, and it was a drive-by-wire system. The throttle system kept locking up. And there was this critical mass of stories where Priuses, we'll call them Prii, where Prii were crashing. And finally, and drivers were saying, oh, it wasn't me. I was pushing the brake, not the gas. Well, when they plug in their OBD2 connector into the car, the investigator, what does the computer say was happening? They were pushing the gas and the brake. So they had their feet on both, but they were already moving, so the gas won. Or it just happened. They say, I don't know what happened. It just went. So what happened is they had a bad system, a bad throttle control system, and it was causing the cars to basically lock wide open and drive. Forward, backward, whatever, it didn't matter. Whatever you were doing when it happened was going to happen faster. Not that Prii are that fast. Thank goodness it didn't happen in a Ferrari. Who is responsible for the damage caused by those wrecked vehicles? The driver was there. The driver, in theory, could have just turned the engine off because that's what we were told to do in driver's ed. If you have a runaway car, not that we really study runaway cars too much anymore, but if you have a runaway car, driver's ed taught us If it's a manual, take it out of gear. Well, most people don't drive manuals anymore. So if it's an automatic, first, you can try to take it out of gear. Sure, unless something's locked up. So you can take it out of gear, or you can turn the car off if the throttle is stuck. And if it won't turn off, well, take it out of gear and get out of the car. Set the brake, whatever. Yeah, okay? And so the question is, who is responsible? Online guys not named Jennifer. Who would you hold responsible, Toyota or the driver? See if they're actually listening. I think they are. I better stop that or they're going to flag me with copyright. No? Jennifer, maybe you're closer to your microphone. Who do you hold responsible?
I vote for Toyota.
Well, eventually, so did the courts for cases after the disclosure. But for the cases that happened before, they're like, there's no proof. My hands are in the air waving, by the way. There's no proof. And so 50%, you're right. 50%, that's not the... I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's not how it happened. So let's fast forward to the autonomous car. Because right now we understand that when those Prii crashed, the insurance companies handled it, and then they sorted it out later. Okay, because that's how it really happened.
Did they do a recall on some of those?
Yes, they absolutely did.
What year Priuses were those?
Lots of them. I don't know. You'll never catch me dead in one, so. Actually, you would. They get phenomenal gas mileage. And if gas goes back up to 5 miles
The new ones, the 2016 ones, are getting up to 58 miles per gallon now.
I thought they were already up with that. Doesn't matter. If gas goes back up to $5 a gallon, I'll probably buy one or something like it. But in the meantime, you won't catch me dead in one. I don't know what year it was. You can just Google Prius throttle crash problem, and I'm pretty sure that search will bring it up. But if you fast forward to what's happening now, in Austin, Texas, and all over California, there are already autonomous cars on the road. I thought it was a Google Maps car that was behind me. It turns out it was an autonomous Google car. There was a person sitting in the passenger seat to hit the brakes in an emergency. There was no driver. There's cameras all over the place, and there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, it looked like one of their Google Maps cars, if you've ever seen one. They look crazy. And I bet they probably are doing double duty. They're probably getting additional Street View stuff going on. And it's going to get them past another hurdle, which I'll touch on in just a second. Bring me back to Google Maps. Street View, okay? But just a little while ago, 2 weeks, a Google car hit a Metro bus in California. And, well, disappointingly, much like Microsoft and Ticketmaster back in the day, I don't know if we covered that one. Microsoft and Ticketmaster were set to settle the deep linking issue, which we're going to cover later. But deep linking is skipping the homepage of a website and linking directly to content buried in the website, allowing the person going to that website to skip the experience that the creator intended them to have. Microsoft was deep linking to Ticketmaster to provide Seattle highlights. And Ticketmaster was going to take them to court. They ended up settling out of court, and so there's no precedent on how it happened. You know, there's no precedent to help us determine what should happen. The same thing happened here. I was all stoked because I was like, yes, the question will be answered. Who is liable?
Yeah. Because they kept going over
liability and who is accountable for the damages if somebody dies? Who is accountable morally, ethically? Can a computer have ethics? Is the owner of the car. So traditionally, right now, if I rear-end you, I'm responsible. They will hold me accountable if they find that I was at fault, and they will hold me financially liable regardless because my hardware damaged your hardware. Right? It's that simple, and that's in Texas at least. It's cut and dried unless you can prove bad faith intent on the other party, and they threw their car in reverse and reversed into you on purpose.
Did Google take responsibility for that car that hit the bus?
They wrote a nice check, which is the problem. I wanted them to say, "Whoa, man, it's just a car. Nobody's to blame." Yeah, Google paid them. Google paid them. I need a court case. I really, really need a court case in my life for this, because it's going to happen. It's going to become a big deal. Lots of people who I've run into have said, sign me up for the automatic driving car, because, hey, you know what? I can go out and I can drink and I don't have to wait for a cab. I can let my car go out and make me money by acting as an Uber or a Lyft while I'm having dinner. Seriously, these are some
People
of the
really
things.
want to use an autonomous and take owner. They consider they're gonna take the money as the Uber driver.
Yes. Wouldn't you? You own the car. And so the thing here is your property is out there making you money. Your property is out there doing all the things your property is allowed to do, because we've covered the precepts of property previously. And so you have the full ownership of the property, but you are not directly responsible for the actions of the vehicle. You have no control over its reaction time. You have no control over its turning abilities, its stopping abilities, its attentiveness. You have no control over its entire experience while you're having dinner and it's Ubering. Or even just parking. Forget Ubering. You have no control over whether or not it parks properly while you're not in it. But it is doing what you told it to do, to the best of its abilities, so far as you know. You have no ill intent, no bad faith in saying, car, go park yourself. No bad faith in saying, car, go Uber. None whatsoever. And no input to the controls. So who is to blame? Who, once we've assigned blame, carries the liability? Who is liable for those damages, especially if they're using cloud computing to drive the autonomous system? A lot of the proposals are running off of cloud technology, so they don't have to pack as much computing power to make it happen.
Any sort of delay.
Well, there you go. What he said was, but any sort of delay is ... That's exactly right.
Well, and it's computers, and if it's on a server, what about like denial of service attacks and hacking?
So now we're getting into more, right? Because cars can already be hacked. If your car is hacked, are you to blame when you crash into somebody because they cut your brakes out? Under the current law, yes, you are. That's not going to keep flying if it happens a lot. If there's a mass attack on every Dodge, because it was Dodge and Chrysler vehicles, if there's a mass attack on every vulnerable Dodge, do you think that every single Dodge owner in the country driving a vulnerable vehicle is going to say, yeah, that's cool, bro, I'll take the hit? Do you think the insurance companies are going to stand for that and pay out that many claims? How many Chrysler vehicles are on the road? How many vehicles did Chrysler sell in 2014?
I own a Chrysler, so
Oh, we're not even talking about OnStar. Like, we're just talking about one brand.
Modern cars are
And connectivity and cell phone and
that seems
Bluetooth proximity. How many cars did Chrysler sell in 2014? Huh? Oh, yeah. Let's bring it closer to home. Let's get past the autonomous car. Let's go before the autonomous car. Does anybody have a car with adaptive speed control? Adaptive cruise control, yeah.
What's the difference
Where-
between cruise
yeah.
control and adaptive cruise control?
It speeds up and slows down to keep up with traffic.
Oh.
It can also shift the car. I had
Uh-huh.
an 86 F-150 that had cruise control, but it couldn't shift.
But it couldn't shift. That's right. Well,
Now it does.
my cruise control did my automatic hand shift, but that's because they built it into the transmission after the cruise control.
I mean, mine can now. I just
Right,
noticed
right.
that
Yeah, absolutely. But adaptive speed control, if you set the speed control and you get reliant on that system working properly,
That's
and
what
then one day your sensor breaks and you rear end somebody, but the sensor didn't break through any negligence of your own, no malfeasance of your own, nothing you did wrong, but you should have been, see? So, should you have been in your autonomous car, ready to slam on the brakes? And if that's the case, can you drink and take your autonomous car home? Because somebody still has to be the designated brake pusher. Seriously. These are the issues that we're going to be faced
The brake
with.
has to be manned.
Right now, there has to be a person in the car to take over for accident prevention. Not that the people have been 100%, because one story estimated that there have probably been as many as 100 autonomous car mishaps, and that they get swept under the rug very quickly. Here's sign here, take this exorbitant check. Never happened. Thanks. Yeah, here's the value of the car you wanted. Seriously.
Yep.
That's, if I was trying to shut you up, that's what I would do.
I know. All you have to say is, no, I want to take you to court. They're going to be like,
The only reason that story made the news like it did is because it was a municipal bus.
yeah.
Not legally. You can't buy the city out legally. They have to file an incident report. Yeah. Because in a lot of states, it's not required that you call the police and that you have a police report, as long as there was no bodily injury.
You're talking just in general or for city?
In general.
Okay.
Well, no, cars, not like
Yeah.
not like general law.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, cars. Car accidents on the road. Some states you have to call the police and get a police report if it happened on a public road, period. Other states, you only have to call, like California, for example. Oddly enough, California, you only have to call if there's bodily injury.
Do you have to call in Texas?
I think you do, but I don't know for sure. They really like to give tickets for failure.
Even
to
like
trigger
for
vehicle.
stuff like rear ending and stuff like
Especially
that?
for getting rear-ended, yes. And a lot of, in Texas, a lot of insurance companies won't honor your claim, process your claim until you have reported it to the police, and they have either chosen to or declined to investigate. Okay. Accountability, liability, oversight. The last thing on my list for tonight is oversight, and this is all conceptual stuff tonight, because these are legal questions that remain unanswered. The only questions we've talked about that are answered is, when do we have to honor a warranty, and who's at fault in a moving violation when all the cars are manned, right? Those are the only things we've actually established. We've established the definitions of some of the overarching concepts for accountability, blame, liable, etc., right? But then there's oversight. Oversight is another word that's frequently used in the description of these words. What is oversight? Within liability, accountability, etc. All the stuff we've talked about tonight. Whoops. I'm out of slides. That's all right. I don't need to write anything else. Keep. And I will go ahead. What's oversight?
Supervision.
Sure. Supervision, from a governmental standpoint, is frequently called regulation. And then there's oversight to ensure the regulation is achieved. What else? Anybody? In-person people?
Be done like in a particular industry. Not watch out for each other.
That's right. So there's public oversight and there's private oversight. If you're smart, you have internal oversight as well. Some different divisions set up, and this is there's another class called organizational system security. If anybody's not had that, you will, and that's discussed there. The need for internal oversight, external oversight, regulation, etc. liability, and this is why I wanted to do this tonight. And from here on, if you guys like it, is I can save the PowerPoints and send them to you guys. Oh no! Share, full screen, start share, stop. There we go. So apparently it flips every time I start it. That's cool. Okay, so am I right in remembering that the expert testimony things were due today?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody get that done? Yes, please? Okay, awesome. Okay, the next one, this is the most fun assignment of the entire semester, in my opinion. This is your conceptual essay. So taking what we've discussed today, project out. Identify a problem with traditional understandings of accountability and liability, any problem of your choosing, and project out to the complications that cyber and digital systems present to that traditional understanding. It can be cars. It can be an example we used in class. It can be cars, right? But I want you to identify something that you think is going to be absolutely legally complicated, that used to be intuitively understood, easy to grasp, and everybody agreed, right? Property law, for example. Vandalism of property. That's hugely complicated. If somebody logs on and hacks your website and defaces it, that's no different. In theory, it does happen. I pick it on purpose. Because what do we charge them with? Do we charge them with breaking and entering because they violated the 1986 Computer Fraud and Abuse Act? Do we charge them with vandalism? Do we charge them with malicious mischief? I don't know. Very few people really do. Identify a traditionally understood accountability and liability issue and project forward to how that's going to become complicated because of cyber, right? Because the worst thing that can happen in terms of legal clarity is ambiguity. If you have ambiguous laws that have wide interpretation latitude, then it's very hard to provide equal enforcement under the law, which we are required to do, as we all recall, right? So, oversight is really, really necessary. Think of it as watchdogging. Think of it as legal regulation. Think of it as internal safeguards. Oversight is key, and it doesn't exist because there was no oversight mechanism at Toyota to review the claims that were coming in of stuck throttles to start with. It wasn't until it went full-blown incident and made the news and became huge. They could have gotten after that immediately, because that car would have been sent, at least by the third one, it would have been sent to a dealership for analysis, right? And so there's a breakdown, there's a lack of oversight, and there's lack of processes that are forward-looking enough and predictive enough to identify that there are likely to be these types of problems that are being caused by cyber integrated systems, or even systems that used to be in person, face-to-face interactions and online, right? This wasn't possible. In fact, I remember seeing this on like Star Trek. Seriously, this is a Star Trek classroom. All I need is my iPad. Look at that. And now I'm Captain Picard reading my reports. It's not even an iPad. See? It's an Android tablet. It's exactly the world we live in. So think about all the problems you always wondered. Well, how do they do that? What about this? Who's to blame for this? Think about one and share it. This is a forward-looking exercise to help you get your mind moving with regards to your final project of proposing legislation. I do not want you to propose legislation. I want you to prognosticate. I want you to predict. I want you to be visionary in your doom and gloom, and or visionary in just, these are the things, this is how great it's going to be, but these are the growing pains as we get there. Does it make sense to everybody? Everybody like this assignment? This is, in my opinion, this is the best assignment of the semester, because you have complete latitude to be as wacky as you want, and to think out of the box as far as you can go, because this is the one where you don't have to find a actual cyber case law. You will need to reference sources. You'll need to show us the traditional understanding that you're asserting. You'll need to show us how these things are traditionally handled and what analogs you're drawing. And to help you out, I have a list of traditional crimes that are now frequently digital crimes, just to help get your mind moving if you need it. All you have to do is type in Andy Bennett, Prezi, P-R-E-Z-I, and then digital crime. And the presentation will pop right up. Okay? So if you're having trouble with inspiration on what to do, go look at the list. It's a fairly large list with case examples. Okay? Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hope everybody had a great spring break, and I'm glad to see so many people were able to make it today. No? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop the broadcast like I always do. Please, if you need to talk about anything off the record, hang out. One last thing, I have not hit the submit grades. Somebody emailed me and asked me about grades and not being able to see their grades. I have not hit the submit button. If you want to know what your grades are on the things you've already submitted, unless you email them directly to me like Jennifer did because she was having an issue, and so if you have an issue and you proactively get with me about it, I handle the grade for that one. So except for Jennifer and one other person who is in my flagged email list, everybody else, all you have to do is go back into the peer review system and you can already see your grades. It's the average of the grades that were given. Okay? So you don't have to wait for me to post them to know what your grades are. And in fact, if you wait for me to post them, you're wasting time to complain about your grade if you have a complaint about your grade. If you don't have a complaint about your grade, good, because I hope you don't. Because that would mean that the rubric has failed. Okay? All right. I'm going to stop the broadcast. If you have anything, hang out.